Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and I'm back with my Week 3 LEC analysis overview, and at the end, my updated power rankings. It's been a very interesting week in the LEC. We got 10 full games to go over, so I don't want to waste too much time. I don't like to make these videos too long. I do have a little bit of a channel announcement, though. As you guys know, this is being recorded on Thursday, February 3rd. That means that in just a couple of days, the LCS is actually starting up, or their regular season is starting up. So if you guys have been waiting on that LCS Power Rankings video, that is coming out tomorrow. So be excited for that. But yes, let's go ahead and start talking about LEC Week 3. We've got a lot of fun games to talk about. Starting off day 1 with Team BDS taking on Astralis in a battle of two of the bottom teams in the standings right now, and probably for quite a while. Yeah, not a great game here. Honestly, it was a good game, I guess, by BDS. Syncroff especially, I thought played pretty well on the Diana. This is a pick that I think he has always been relatively good on. He was good on it last year when they played it very, very limitedly in the LFL, but it was decent this year. BDS has gotten off to a pretty slow start, but I think if you're looking for positives on that team, jungle mid, I think, has been pretty solid to start the year. Nuclear playing something other than Syndra looks good, even though I think last week or 2 weeks ago, I said maybe they should just play Syndra. Well, they tried that, and they counterpicked every single time, so him being on Twisted Fate here, I think, opened up the map a lot. Adam on Bruisers makes a lot of sense. And while Xmatty and Limit have been a weakness, they're also going up against probably the worst bot lane in the LEC, and so they don't look nearly as bad in this one, even if they lose by like 10 CS. It still doesn't look that bad. They look fine in team fights. As for Astralis, they are completely inept. I had to deliberate on who to give the dud of the series to here, because it could have gone to a lot of people. It could have gone to Zanzara on the Viego, who just doesn't have the mechanics to be at the LEC level. It seems, honestly, he plays really well on champions like on Trundle, you know, his main pick, and then, honestly, he does well on things like the Jarvan as well, things that I think are a lot more straightforward, you know, super early gank heavy, kind of assist the team, stand in the front. But Viego requires, I think, a little bit more positioning, and Zanzara just doesn't have that. He had a pretty poor game. Dior is actually my dud of the game here on the Silas, just kept going in and dying over and over again. I don't think it's necessarily his fault, but, you know, not a great game here. I know a lot of people were really confused when Dior was signed, and he really hasn't been that good to start off anyways. As per usual, you could give the dud of the game here to Promise Q. He just wasn't good on the Rakan. There were no real successful engages that meant anything at any point in the game. Decent disengage at one point, but that's really it. And then White Knight in the top lane on Kennen did absolutely nothing. So, honestly, this is just BDS steamrolling Astralis in 30 minutes. Nothing was ever really close. Astralis is clearly the worst team, I think, in any of the 4 major regions. I don't think I can be convinced otherwise. I think in most cases, I get this question a bit, like, do I think the bottom of each region is that different? No, I actually don't. I think, like, if you look at the worst teams of Korea and the worst teams of China and the worst teams of North America and the worst teams of Europe, they're probably all around the same skill level, but I think Astralis is just like a tier below all of them. I think they really are that bad right now, and they have to change a lot if they want to not be in that conversation anymore. As for BDS, he needed this win. This win would have been catastrophic to not get, but it's good to have it. Syncroff played really well. He's my player of the game here. He looked really good here. Him and Nuclear are developing a nice chemistry, and then Adam is still fine in that like solo position top lane. The bot lane is still a little bit of a concern, but in this one, it didn't matter too much. So you're just going to be happy with your win, and you're going to be happy to move on, I think, in this one. Jumping in here to Game 2 of Day 1, we had Excel taking on Mad Lions. An interesting game here that could have went both directions, honestly. And I think we say that about a lot. I think we say that about Excel a lot this season. I feel like they do a really good job of getting control early in games through good laning and good macro early. A lot of that is due to Marcoon, honestly, playing early games really well and then playing late games really poorly, which is not exactly what we saw last season and is definitely a little bit concerning. I assume he's not the only shot caller on this team or anything, but his early game decision making, his pathing is all really good. And then by the time we get to late game, typically it's usually falling apart. So whatever the change there is, Excel's not doing so great in that department, but Mad Lions looks really good in this series. They definitely still have some problems, but they look really good. Unforgiven's my player of the game here. He was awesome on the Varus, just did so much damage. His positioning in those team fights is immaculate. That's really something that I thought he was going to be more raw on coming into the league, was his positioning. He had a tendency to sometimes get caught in team fights when he was playing for SK Prime, but ever since he's come to Mad Lions, that's certainly a part of the game that he's worked on a lot. You can tell, at least in the offseason, because his positioning has been significantly better, and he did a really good job of that in this game, doing a ton of damage on a Varus champion that I don't think a lot of people are expecting that much damage to come out of. Elyoya also had a great game here on the Lee Sin, kind of taking over the mid game when it comes to map awareness and macro and all that stuff. Where this team, I think, struggled in the early game was definitely Armut in the top lane on the Akali. He definitely made up for it late game, just popping into the backline and killing two pretty much immediately, and then just getting out, because tank Akali's the worst. But early game, he didn't do so hot into Finn. Finn actually had a pretty decent early game into Armut. He kind of trolled that early game, but, you know, Finn goes to the flank late game, is ridiculously late. Whatever the coordination Excel had was not there. Isn't part of the fight. Armut blows everybody up, and they lose the game. You could have given the dud of the game to pretty much anybody on Excel, I think, in this one, except for Finn and Marcoon, who had pretty good early games. Nuke had a good scoreline on the Vygar. Yes, you picked Vygar. Oh, also, yeah, I didn't even talk about it. Mickey X is in for Excel. I talked about it a little last week. Advieta is out, which is a little bit sad. There are a lot of teams in the LEC that I think could use him right now, but Mickey X is in, and, you know, he was not so good in this game. He was on the Galio with the fasting Senna. Wasn't so good in this one. He very nearly got my dud of the dud of the game here, but my dud of the game does go to Patrick, who I think just trolled a lot of the team fights on Senna. It's clear that this is not a pick that he's very comfortable on, because in these team fights, there are multiple times where he could save his teammates with a Q and just doesn't do it. He goes for an offensive Q instead, and lets his teammates die. And, you know, honestly, that's a question mark ping in solo queue, but I think it's just I haven't played Senna enough to really remember the fact that I have to balance not only trying to be a top damage dealer, but also be a big healing factor for my team in the late game, and unfortunately, Patrick just didn't have that in this one. A little bit, but you could have given it to Mickey X. Mickey X, I don't think, hit anything on the Galio the entire game, so, you know, you could have given it to him. Nuke Duck's scoreline, like I said, looks good on the Vygar, but he didn't do anything. He got outranged the entire game by Varus Victor, which, you know, theoretically, you can zone out the Akali, right, with your Cage. Even just the threat of Cage, you can keep that on your cooldown and just kind of zone out the Akali, keep her from going in and destroying things, but he was kind of just throwing down Cage at every opportunity, and that meant as soon as that thing was down, Akali basically had a free window to go in, because they had no real way to stop it except for, like, a Miracle Xin Zhao ultimate that would catch it perfectly, or something like that. But yeah, just not well played by Nuke Duck. Not super well played by Excel in general, but a good win here for Mad. They're looking better and better. Their early game definitely still needs some work. They've fallen behind a couple times in the early game this season, but their late game team fighting is actually really, really good. And if they can get to that late game and kind of get online, Unforgiven's shown that he can be really good at it. Elyoya's a great team fighter. Armut's a great team fighter. Kaiser's a great team fighter. Reeker played one of his better games of the split here. Mad Lions does look really, really good if they can get to that part of the game. Jumping in here to Game 3 here of Day 1, we had Team Vitality taking on SK Gaming, and a matchup that went exactly as you would have expected at the beginning of the year for sure. Vitality definitely looks to be back on track here, an absolute demolition of SK in this one on every level. Everybody on Vitality looked pretty good. They're all, you know, we saw it last week in their 2-0 series week there, that they all just kind of win lane and then come together and are so far ahead that they just snowball the game out of control. That's kind of what happened again here, but a lot of it was just due to how proactive this jungle mid duo was the entire game. I love the Gwen jungle pick. It's a pick we've seen in other regions in the world so far this year, and it seems to work. I kind of like this pick. It's decent in the meta right now. If you can get ahead on it, especially, it's really difficult to stop. If you have good gank support, it can be really, really nice, and you kind of have that in this one, especially bot lane. But the player of the game for me is going to be Perks. I know Selfmade had like a big pop-off game here, but for me, Perks was the driving force behind a lot of it. Those quirky, you know, roams and that package late game, I mean, it was absolutely absurd what Perks was able to do to just win games. He created so much of an advantage bot lane for Selfmade and for Carzzy. You know, in lane, he absolutely destroyed Certus. Perkz just had a really good game here on the Corki, and that's a really good sign to see. Because it looks like he's pretty comfortable playing that champion, which looks like it's going to be meta for quite a bit of 2022. But yeah, Selfmade also had a phenomenal game here. I actually think Lebrov was also really, really good here on the Rakan. So those are the three players I really want to point out. Although Alfari played well in the top lane, he just didn't do much. And then Carzzy was kind of the recipient of a lot of really good play around him. Not that he made any mistakes. He didn't die at all this game, but you know, he didn't really have to do anything. Carzzy is the supportive player on this team, and he's really, really good at that role. He's arguably the best AD carry for that role in the world. I mean, or at least in the West. So yeah, really good on Carzzy there. But SK Gaming, not good. They're just not a good team, are they? They have one good player in Treats at support on the Nautilus, who did a decent job of trying to peel for his team, but God, there's really only so much you can do when you just get snowballed out of control and you're a Nautilus and you're the only player on your team that's actually trying to do anything. Treats is just in elo hell here on SK, unfortunately, but Certus is going to be my dud of the game here on the Orianna. Just got completely outlaned and out-macroed here by Perkz. That's gonna happen, but it's, you know, not a good sign to see. Gilius also had a pretty bad game. He's had a pretty bad start to the year, I would say. Gilius has worked out almost exactly as I expected, which is we're getting the bad version of Gilius because the team around him just isn't good enough to make him look good. Not to say that he's always just had a team to make him look good. Somebody's gonna take that out of context, but just, I don't think he's at the point in his career where he can carry a team at all. I think he is carryable, but I don't know. I don't think he's going to be someone who propels your team to any wins. As, you know, around that, I don't think anybody else played particularly well. SK is a bottom tier team. That is exactly what we're seeing here. They're just not good. Pretty much at anything, if we're being honest. It's really just Treats trying to peel and not being able to peel enough because they have no prio and they lose every lane and they can't really do anything about it. So, yeah, SK is not so good, but a very good win here for Vitality. They're on a 3-0 win streak right now after that tremendously terrible week 1. So, you know, them being on fire, I think, is a really, really, really good sign for Vitality moving forward. Moving into Game 4 here of Day 1. Ooh, I've been waiting to talk about this one all week. If you follow me on Twitter, which you should, Twitter down in the description below, you'll know that I'm frustrated by this game. Very, very, very frustrated by this game. We had a top-of-the-table clash here between Rogue and Fnatic. Rogue taking the win. That's a huge win for Rogue, and I know I have a lot of Rogue fans in my comments section, and so I want to try to word this carefully. But, and don't get mad, Rogue fans, because later in the week I will be much more positive, more about you, but golly, this, in my opinion, might be the worst draft any team has made in 2022, on Fnatic's side. This is atrociously awful. I'm usually a fan of Fnatic's drafts. Yamato, ever since he's, you know, taken over for Fnatic, I think has done a good job drafting for that team, but golly, this is an unwinnable draft, in my opinion. I think on every level, this is completely unwinnable. So let's talk about what you give up. And obviously, everybody knows that I'm not draft guy, typically. I don't really talk about draft because, you know, I think you could still win even if you have a poor draft. But this is giga-inting draft, in my opinion. Let's talk about what you give up. You give up Larsen's Twisted Fate, which is arguably his best pick. You know, that and the Rise, you can make your argument, right? Larsen's Twisted Fate, which he has shown a propensity to absolutely take over maps on, right? And so the only real way to answer that is to pick somebody who can follow him because you have to be able to outplay him. And then you also give up the Janna into this comp, which we'll get to. But you pick Renekton, Diana, Orianna, and then the cursed Lucian Nami bot lane. This team comp has no purpose after 10 minutes. It just doesn't, right? You pick the Diana, you know, ideally because you want to play that Lucian mid lane, I would assume, right? But something happens where you don't end up wanting to play that Lucian mid. Maybe you don't want to play it into the TF where you're just going to get completely out-macroed. Okay. You flex the Lucian bot, you pick the Nami. Lucian Nami has like a 1 for 15 win rate right now in the world, but okay. We'll just pick the worst bot lane in the world and try and win on that. But we're going to pick Orianna as a mid. Okay, so now you also don't match Twisted Fate at all because you don't particularly shove super fast and then you can't make any sort of macro play with Orianna. And now you have a Diana-Orianna jungle mid duo that is completely inept and can't punish the Twisted Fate at all if he lands one gold card on a gank. So, what exactly is, where do you get the lead here? And not only that, but you're now playing Renekton into Gwen, in which you're not even going to get that outstanding, unbelievable early lead that you really wanted. Where on the map does this team win at any point in the game? Because to me, it's none and never. Nowhere on the map do they win at no points in the game. Like, they... it is a just complete inept draft, in my opinion. I think this is unwinnable. But, you know, for Rogue's point, I'm done talking about the draft. For Rogue's point, Malrang played like an absolute animal on this Viego. He took over the map completely out-jungled Razork and had complete control. Larson had another great game here on the TF. Comp got a lot of kills here on the Jhin. Odoamne outplayed Wonder in the top lane. This was a really, really good win here for Rogue. It's hard for me to say that this is how it would happen over and over and over again, because this is just like an unparalleled bad draft, in my opinion. Really, the only place where you win is bot lane, maybe early, but as we've already discussed, I think this lane is actually giga bad right now, and I still think I think the Janna just negates anything that you want to do in this Lucian Nami lane. So yeah, I mean, it's just turbo bad. But good for Rogue. I mean, you can have a team like Fnatic that has a really bad draft, right? But you still have to be a pretty good team to take advantage of that, right? Because teams make mistakes in draft and in-game all the time. But if you're not good enough to be able to take advantage of those mistakes, then it doesn't matter, right? But Rogue clearly shows that they are good enough to take advantage of those mistakes. And they absolutely did. Malrang, clearly my player of the game here. Humanoid, clearly my dud of the game. Both of them, I don't think I really have to explain too much. I guess you could give it to Razork as the dud of the game if you really wanted to. We got completely out-jungled by Malrang. An absolute diffie in the jiffy, if you will. But I think this way is just too obvious. Malrang had an unbelievable game. He's had an unbelievable start to the year. So have Odo and Larson and Comp and Trimby. Honestly, this entire Rogue team have all been super, super duper good to start the year, and this is a huge win for Rogue and for confidence. For Fnatic, honestly, if I'm Fnatic, I'm chalking this up to being like, well, this was an outlier. Because we're never going to have a draft like this again, where we play for the first 10 minutes and nothing else. So ideally we'll, you know, be able to face Rogue next time. I think if you're a Fnatic fan, you're not going to take this loss super duper hard, but it's definitely a little bit frustrating to see a game that I think could have been one of the more fun of the week just kind of devolve into a big stomp, because there was really just not a lot of tools in the toolkit for you to do anything about it. And then moving on to the final game here of day one, we had G2 Esports taking on Misfits Gaming in what I can only describe as a clown fiesta. I almost don't even want to spoil how this game goes, because I want everyone to go and watch it and just not have an idea of what's happening. But, you know, it's my job to kind of go over what happened, so I guess I'll do it here. G2 wins the game. It was clean. Nothing happened. It was all G2 all the way. No, nothing in the middle at all. G2 gets a really, really early lead because of some awesome, awesome plays here from Yankos and Caps. I'm typically not a fan of the Ryze pick right now in the meta, but Caps is so good, and getting him back on that roam playstyle that he was, you know, that's him. That's who Caps is, right? Getting Caps back to being Caps in this game was a really, really good sign. Him and Yankos linked up perfectly in the early game and just got a really big lead. And then they're just like, well, do we want to throw it all? Yeah, we can throw it all. And they throw it all. Misfits gets a lead. Misfits are like, hey, can we throw it all? And Misfits are like, yeah, you know what, yeah, let's throw it all. And then they throw it, and then G2 wins. And it's, you know, clean, never in question. G2 was up at 10 minutes, and they were up at 35 when the game was over. That means they had full control the entire time. Nothing ever happened in the middle. It doesn't matter. What a game. Just in general, like I said, I highly recommend you watch it if you haven't seen it already. It's just a fiesta, but in a good way. Not in a way where it's like two bad teams throwing themselves at each other. In a way where it's like two good teams that just keep making mistakes that keep making like ridiculous plays over and over again. Love it, love it. Yeah, Caps is my player of the game here. He was so good in the early game, and he was really important in the late game as well. Tank Rise still not doing a ton of damage, but his roams to get his teammates fed, really important. Flakkid got really online because of Caps. And Yankos as well. I want to give a big shout out to Yankos. He was great. My dud of the game here is going to be Schlatan in the jungle for Misfits. He just got out-jungled by Yankos. Yankos, of course, making what I assume was the throwing call. I assume he's the shot caller on this team, but making the throwing call. Schlatan, you know, taking advantage of that, but outside of that, he got real out-jungled in this game by Yankos, who's just having a great start to the season. Misfits look kind of lost if VTO isn't able to just completely outskill his mid lane opponent, which is not a good sign for them going up against some of the best teams in the LEC, because, you know, Misfits kind of needs to be able to outskill in the mid lane, and a lot of the good top LEC teams have really, really good mid laners. That's not to say VTO's not just, like, as good as them, because VTO at the beginning of the year is been unbelievably good for this Misfits team, so much so that they're in the upper tier of, like, that bottom, that just outside of good tier, in my opinion. But, you know, VTO in this game couldn't get a huge advantage, and they just didn't have ways to close it out. I say, but they absolutely had, they should have closed it out. They absolutely should have. This wasn't a game that they should have lost, but then again, it wasn't a game they should have had a chance to win in the first place. So, you know, honestly, just crazy from everybody. Schlatan not great. VTO was fine. Neon was fine. I thought they were the players that played at least fine. They were good in those team fights, right? But, yeah, this is really just a fiesta all the way through. It's really hard to take too much analysis from it. Let's just leave it at a good win for G2, bad win for Misfit, or bad loss for Misfits. Yeah, the game happened. It's hard to analyze. That brings us here into day 2, and kicking off day 2 for us was Team BDS taking on SK Gaming, a battle of two lower tier teams, I would say here, but BDS definitely looking a lot better than that this week with a nice win here against SK, a really clean one. Yes, it's against a bad team that had a bad draft, but still a really, really clean game here from BDS, and they look, I mean, they look a ton better in this week than they did both in weeks 1 and week 2. Whatever Grabs and Duff and that coaching staff has done for BDS in the past week has certainly worked, because they look a lot better, and Syncroft looks a lot better. He had a great game here on the Xin Zhao, controlled the entire map, just completely out-jungled Gilius at every point in the game. He's my player of the game here. Him and Nuclearant are forming a really nice jungle mid synergy here. They're kind of the backbone of this BDS team right now, and it's working. I really like the direction that's going in. When you have Xin Zhao Rise, you really need to make a lot of proactive plays, a lot of invades, a lot of roams, things like that need to happen. That's kind of what you want to do to out-pressure the Victor especially. And they did that this game. Honestly, I really like how these two are syncing up. I think it's a really nice combo that BDS can build upon, even if this year isn't the year. Everybody else on the team played fine as well. I really like the Ezreal pick for Xmatty. I think it gives him a lot more safety and a lot more, you know, as long as he's actually doing damage, a lot more flexibility, I think, in how he can play. It's a pick that I would expect to see BDS go back to a lot as the season goes on. And Ezreal Karma as a lane, I think, is overall just really, really solid right now. And then Adam was fine in the top lane. It's not really anything, you know, there wasn't a tension top. SK, though, not looking too good. Gilius is my dud of the game here. Completely out-jungled. They pick the Olaf early, I assume to take it away from Adam, who, you know, obviously plays a lot of the Olaf. But I really see no other reason to play Olaf here, because it's not like Olaf is particularly good in the meta right now. And you're also playing it with a 0cc comp. You have essentially Victor W, and that's it. I mean, Olaf, you know, acts as slow. And then you have Polymorph, but, like, you have no stuns on this team, other than the Victor W if you can land it, which is not good. Playing Olaf into a team with 0cc is typically not good. And, yeah, that's kind of what we saw. Gilius got completely out-pressured early game here by the Xin Zhao. Nuclearant was way early on the roams with Certus because he was just hard pushing lane. He was winning lane. And then Jezu and Treats really just couldn't do anything. Treats, I thought, had another decent game. Jezu, I thought, had a pretty good game here on the Jinx as well. But honestly, at that point, it didn't matter. Jungle mid is just too bad for SK. And I think that's really the story of SK's season so far, has been that jungle mid has just been too much of a problem for them to actually win games. Their bot lane is playing all right. Their top lane's playing meh. But their jungle mid has been one of the worst in the league, and that's going to cost them a lot. Everybody on this channel knows that I think jungle mid is the most important part of the map, especially in the meta right now. And if SK is going to struggle on that part of the map more than any other part of the map, I don't have a lot of high high output expected from SK for the rest of the season. Not a lot of expected wins coming from this team if they can't figure something out, because Gilius and Certus are not good, and they're not playing well right now. But for BDS, another solid win here. 2-0 week is going to be really, really good for them. Hopefully they can build on that momentum. I like this team going into the season, and I'm hoping that they can kind of turn it around. Syncroft has been really, really good over the past few weeks, so is Nuclear. And if they can kind of build on that, if bot lane can get a little bit more stable, maybe playing some more passive picks like this, Ezreal Karma, Ezreal Braum, maybe playing something like the Senna. I think the BDS team could actually be, I don't want to say a playoff, team, but, I think closer to that than they would be to, like, the bottom two, theoretically. So, well, hopefully they can figure that out. Jumping into game 2 here of day 2, we had the 0-6 Astralis team taking on Excel, and Excel wins in a fashion that I would have hoped would have been cleaner, but still was decently clean. I mean, still was never really that much in doubt. Excel wins here, and they look a lot better with their new roster than they did in game 1. I think a lot of their players are maybe just a little not comfortable early game. That's really kind of the vibe I'm getting with Excel right now, is they're going to struggle in that early game, and if they can get to late game and be either even or just behind or whatever, right? I think they're going to have a good shot because they have a lot of good team fighters on this team. Marcoon is really the only person who has any semblance of early game, like, presence. And he didn't have a great early game, but he didn't have a bad one here on the Lee Sin. Just kind of a boring early game. Astralis drafts a super early game heavy comp. You draft the Lucian Nami lane. Everyone knows my favorite lane. And then the Xin Zhao. And you want to play for early game, and again, it doesn't happen. You're not good enough to play for early game. So Excel just kind of gets to scale into late game with a Vigar and a Jinx. And eventually they get to the point where they can just win the game. Mickey's going to be my player of the game here. I thought he played really well on the Lulu. Lulu's a pick that it's really easy to look good on Lulu because everything you do is, quite frankly, flashy. And that was kind of the case in this one. I'm not sure if Mickey was overall, like, the best player in the entire game, but it certainly felt like what he was doing had a big impact, especially in those team fights late game. He was keeping Patrick alive, keeping Nutek alive, and pretty much stopping the Vex from being able to do anything on the side of Astralis. Vex is not a pick that has worked for Dior at all this year, but yeah, Mickey's going to be my player of the game here. Patrick, I thought, also played well on the Jinx. Bot lane was really kind of the big shining point for Excel, I guess, if you want to look on that respect, but on Astralis, I mean, they're just bad. Like, there's really no other way to put it. Promisecue, honestly, actually a pretty decent game here. But Zanzra is just terrible. He's been the worst player in the LEC so far in 2022. He just hard-inted. He can't play right now. He was someone who I don't want to say I was excited about when he came in last year, but, he was someone who I had a decent amount of promise on coming in. Thought he would be all right. He was fine last year. He wasn't, like, atrociously bad. And then now this year, he's been, like, unplayably bad, in my opinion. And I think they're going to have to find a replacement in jungle if they actually want to at all have a shot of not going, like, 0-18, because he will lose you games. And he has lost them a lot of games. He's clearly my dud of the game, by the way. I don't know if I already said that, but yeah, Promisecue actually had the best game of the split so far for those tracking, oh, what's Promisecue still doing in the LEC? He's had significantly more good games than either Dior or Zanzra have at any point this year. Kabe has been useless, as he's been for a lot of this year. I know a lot of people are going to get mad when I say that, but it's not. Kabe has done nothing this year. He hasn't done anything, like, particularly horrible, but I can't remember a good Kabe play this year. So for all the people that are like, Kabe's hard stuck, well, I don't know. I don't know so much about that one. I would think that Jessica at this point is still probably better. And obviously Magic Felix is for sure better than what you're getting out of Dior. So this team definitely downgraded in the offseason, unfortunately, and now you're just stuck with it. So, yeah, Astralis sucks at this pace. If they win a game, it's going to be a shock at any point in the season. I don't think there's any team, maybe other than SK, that I would be like, they have a shot at beating, but they look terrible. It's a good win for Excel. They needed it. I would have wished it would have been more concrete against a team like Astralis that is just really, really bad and doesn't have any sort of prospect of looking like they're going to get better or have any upside or anything like that. You would have hoped they would have been able to close it out a lot cleaner. But again, this is their first week with their brand new support. I expect this team will only get better as time goes on. 2 games of Vigar from Nukeduck are a little bit concerning because that champion is just not good. And if you're going to go back to that over and over and over again, you better be able to, like, punish it. Like, other teams are going to be able to punish it. And so we'll see. We'll see if they continue to go to that Vigar pick. Hopefully not. But Excel just not looking as clean as you would want. But a dub's a dub, I guess, right? Moving on to game 3 here of day 2, we had the Mad Lions taking on Misfits Gaming. A nice win here for Misfits. They needed this one. This is actually a really big win for them off the back of VTO just being really, 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 really good. And yeah, this is almost exactly what I talked about in Misfits' game earlier in the week, in the fact that I think they can beat anybody if VTO can get ahead in lane, if he can just win lane hard enough. And Mad Lions is actually a team that, while I think Mad is like quote-unquote better than Misfits, they have a really tough matchup here with Misfits because their worst player of the year so far has probably been Reeker, or at least their most underperforming has probably been Reeker. And VTO is just going to beat Reeker in lane. And if VTO gets ahead, he's really tough to deal with in teamfights. Armut has had a really slow start to the year as well, and Hirit is also somebody who can do really well in the late game. And those two really took over this game. The top side of the map was really, really strong for Misfits in general. A really, really good week here, I think, for VTO, who just looks good in general. And a really good game on the Akali. His Akali's nuts. We've known that for a while now, but his Akali mechanics are just unfair, almost. I don't like the draft for Mad Lions, but even so, Misfits was still in a position where they had opportunities, and I think, or they didn't have opportunity. Like, it wasn't like clear cut that they were just going to win the game based on draft, but Akali shouldn't win against Victor, and Akali won against Victor. VTO is just too good. At this point, I'm considering him like he very well could be the favorite to win the MVP of the LEC so far this year. He's been just too freaking good for Misfits. He's been the most valuable player to his team in the LEC. While he isn't on the best team, Misfits would be bottom 2 without VTO, for sure. But outside of that, Shawtown had a good game. Hirit, I thought, had a really good game on the Gwen as well. I want to give props to Hirit, who won lane pretty well against a Renekton. But Mad's got some struggles here. The draft is interesting. Again, you pick Renekton Italy, something that I think is just not super good right now. But okay, if you want to focus topside, that's fine. But you pick Renekton Italy and then never gank top, especially for a player who is known for being much better out of lane than he is in lane in Armut. Armut's my dud of the game here. He didn't have a good one on this Renekton. You could definitely say that. He was outperformed pretty much the entire game here. The solo lanes have definitely become the weakness for Mad Lions, which is not a good sign. Typically, you don't want your solo lanes to be your giant weakness. But it's really been jungle and bot lane that have been really good for Mad so far this year, and the solo lanes have kind of let them down, and it happened again here. VTO, like I said, outplaying Reeker. Hirit outplaying Armut. Elyoya didn't have a great game either here on the Nidalee. He used his map pressure very weirdly, which was to say not at all. And I get it, you don't want to try to fight that Lee Sin early, but, you know, you got to do something on Nidalee to generate advantages, or else your team is just going to get outscaled like it did here. The Gwen outscaled the Renekton, and the Akali won against the Victor, and Akali already outscales the Victor, so. And then obviously you're going into a Jinx Leona. That teamfight is going to be absolutely ludicrously disgusting to have to play into, so. Yeah, not a good game here for Mad, but honestly, this is a pretty bad matchup for a Mad Lions team. All their weaknesses are pretty well covered by Misfits. And I'm not going to say this is just some, like, end of the line, Mad loses against worst team, but, you know, they're, like, 6th place now. They're the worst team. I think this could just be a sake of, yeah, it didn't happen today. You know, sometimes that happens, and you really got to try to identify that. Mad didn't seem very on their game. Elyoya seemed off his game. I don't like the draft. It's not a good game for Mad, but it is a good game for Misfits. I wouldn't be too terrible. I wouldn't be too taken aback. I wouldn't be too frustrated, is I guess what I'm trying to say, if I was a Mad Lions fan. But if I'm a Misfits fan, it always feels good to beat a team that is supposed to be this much better than you. And VTO really is just looking like an MVP right now. Moving on to game 4 here of day 2, we had a much more telling win here for Rogue as they take on and defeat Team Vitality, a surging Team Vitality. And yes, draft was a little bit clunky in this one as well, but honestly, it was clunky for both sides in my opinion, which we'll get to, but just this is the kind of win that you need if you're a Rogue fan. I think, you know, you talk about the Fnatic win early in the week. I complained about how draft was completely unplayable for Fnatic that game. Okay, well, it feels like I'm taking away a little bit from Rogue's accomplishment. This is that win. Like, beating Fnatic is huge, but draft, beating Vitality, where draft was kind of weird on both sides, this is a dub for Rogue. I mean, this is a prove-it kind of win, and a prove-it kind of week for Rogue, that they are arguably the best team in the West right now. Comp looked unbelievable going up against his former team. How dare you bench me? The revenge game comes in. He's clearly the player of the game. He was phenomenal on this Caitlyn. The Caitlyn Lux is traditionally like a ridiculously strong lane and something that I think a lot of people are going to complain that Rogue was just allowed to have. But honestly, we've seen it be beat in multiple ways across every region in the world. This isn't some unbeatable lane. Comp and Trimby played this lane ridiculously well. These two have great synergy. I think much better than Trimby had with Hansama last year. Even if Comp isn't as good, quote-unquote, mechanically, like as Hansama was, I think these two work together so much better than Hansama and Trimby did last year. They're always on the same page. They do really well in lane and out of lane. Comp played fantastic on this Caitlyn. Trimby played fantastic on the Lux. And then Malrang had another really good game here on the Volley Bear. The high ganking, high impact style Volley Bear play here I think is really good from Rogue. And then Odo just picks Ornn to stop the Alphari split push in the top lane. Although, quote-unquote, stop the Alphari split push. He's playing Graves, and, you know, all he did was sit top lane. You could very realistically give him dud of the game here, but at least he, you know, played laning phase all right. But yeah, Rogue with a really, really solid win here. Vitality, you know, this was a little concerning because they did rely on the game plan that they had over the past week or so, which is we're going to get really far ahead in our lanes and we're going to snowball. But the problem was they didn't get really far ahead in their lanes, which means they couldn't just snowball it out of control. And I'm not really sure they have a backup plan for when that doesn't work for them because they just didn't really know what to do. We saw Alphari with that random TP into Baron just to die. This team doesn't have a great sense of macro after, I think, a certain point of the game when if they're not, like, ahead. And that is definitely a concern for Vitality. I don't think they necessarily played poorly this game. Again, I still think the jungle mid duo is pretty good here. Selfmade and Perks, I say pretty good. They're still one of the best in the region here, but they definitely have some things to work on. The macro of this team, I don't know who the shot caller is, but whoever it is, the macro of this team is definitely questionable at best. But I can't say enough good things about Rogue in this one. A great, great win. A solidifying, like, top of the table win that I think proves that they are a force to be reckoned with. They went 1v1 in almost every single lane with Vitality, the super team, who had been curb stomping everybody in lane up to this point. And they not only held their own, but they won a lot of these lanes. Malrang outplayed Selfmade. Comp and Trimby outplayed Karzi and Labrov. Odo Omne at least held his own against Alphari. And then Larson held his own against Perks. This is, this is as good a showing as you're going to want to see out of Rogue. And I think it means really, really good things for them going forward. That's going to bring us to our final game here of the weekend. We had Fnatic taking on G2, the classic LEC European matchup here. And G2 is actually going to take the first strike in this series of the year. A really solid win here for them, macro-wise, especially after going down in the early game as much as they were. Honestly, their macro has been really consistently good in every game except for their game against Misfits earlier in the week. But other than that, their macro has honestly been really good this year. And I put a lot of that on both Yankos and the addition of Targamas, who were both pretty well known for being really, really good macro. Shot callers, macro-wise, whatever you want to call them. G2, I think, had a tough hole to climb themselves out of, positionally, at least in this game. Caps getting Flame Horizon by Humanoid is a huge surprise, but it is a really good laning phase from Humanoid. And Caps honestly played it poorly, but then after that, after laning phase ended, like basically after 15 minutes, this game was a different game entirely. Humanoid forgot how to play League of Legends, and then Caps just took over. He had a really good game here. I want to point out the Aatrox pick in the top lane for Broken Blade. It's something we know that Broken Blade loves to play, and I love him on this pick. It's something that I think really accentuates his strengths, which is the fact that he can kind of dominate in laning, quote-unquote dominate in laning phase. He can play more aggressive in laning phase, kind of get his lead, and then use that to transition it into like flanks in team fights and big plays in team fights. I think that's what Broken Blade does best, and that's exactly what happened in this game. That's why he is my player of the game. He looked phenomenal in those late game team fights on the Aatrox. I expect G2 to go back to this pick. And honestly, I expect a lot of teams in the world to slowly start picking this Aatrox pick up more, because I think it just works with a lot of the comps that are really popular right now. A lot of the backline control mages that I think are popular in, you know, just every part of the world right now, I would say the Victors, your Orianas, you know, things like that, I think really benefit from having someone like Aatrox who can kind of get in there and disrupt the backline to give you opportunity to just kind of free fire. You know, Jinx loves that as well. We also saw the Zillion takeaway for G2, which I thought was really, really poggers by Targamas. You love to see that. Poor Hillisang had to play Rakan, and he lost. That was insane. But, yeah, for Fnatic, I think you have some positives. Like I said, Humanoid in laning phase was good, but everybody else was just kind of meh in laning phase. You were hoping for a bigger weekend from Upset and Hillisang. You didn't quite get that. And then Razork, I thought, had a pretty poor game here. He got out jungled pretty hard by Yankos, who had a really good game. Yankos has had a really good week, but Razork kind of had a tough one here on the Lee Sin. Humanoid is going to get my dud of the game here, even though he had a good laning phase, because he was just really atrocious after 15 minutes. He was easily the worst player in the game after 15 minutes here, and it kind of cost Fnatic the game, in my opinion. If he would have been able to carry on the Azir, a pick where you're supposed to maybe not lose early, but at least, like, go eat, you know, you're not supposed to, like, dominate early and then lose late. That's not what Azir is picked for, but you have Azir or Felios, you get a lead early and you throw it. Not exactly what you want to see from the Fnatic comp. Obviously, I'm not pulling the plug on Fnatic being one of the best teams in the LEC or anything like that, but an 0-2 week here from Fnatic is not exactly what you wanted to see, especially when they're going pretty much against what their comp wants them to do. I still think their bot lane's phenomenal. Wonder's been fine, you know, going up against, you know, two decent top laners this week. You know, it is what it is, right? But I say decent. Broken Blade and Odo Omne are good top laners. But Razork and Humanoid had pretty tough weeks, Humanoid especially. Definitely some things that they need to work on. But as for G2, this is a huge win that they're going to be very happy, I think they have, come later in the season, because if you can take games off of these top teams, I think you're going to be looking a lot more comfortable in the standings, a lot closer to that 2-3 spot than you will to that 4-5 spot, which honestly at this point is a little bit contested. So, you know, G2 I think is going to be really happy. Solo laners and jungler played really well here. So did Flakkid and Targamas. I don't want to take that away. Honestly, all of G2 played well in this one, and they absolutely deserved this win. All right, that is going to do it for my Week 3 overview and analysis of all 10 games that happened in the LEC. Up on the screen right now, on the left, you are going to see the current standings in the LEC. Any ties will just be broken alphabetically. On the right, you are going to see my updated power rankings with a number next to each team, showing how they have changed from last week to this week. Let's go over the biggest risers and the biggest fallers. Rogue jumping up to number 1. I don't think that is really disputable at this point. Do I think that they are the best, undisputed, no question team in the LEC? I don't know yet, but right now, I think you would be insane to put them anywhere else. They just beat Fnatic and Vitality in back-to-back games, so yeah, they're going to go number 1 for me in the power rankings. Fnatic and Vitality both fall down a spot. G2 is going to leapfrog Mad here for me. Mad had a little bit of a struggling week, and they have some flaws here, but G2, I think, is kind of firing on all cylinders. I think they're a lot closer to Vitality than they are to Mad. And then Misfits and Excel both sitting there at 6 and 7. BDS leapfrogging SK. BDS having that nice 2-0 week. SK kind of really being bad this week, showing that there is kind of a gap between 8 and 9, and then SK and Astralis at the bottom. My player of the week here is actually going to go to Syncroft on BDS. A really good week here for the rookie jungler on BDS. He absolutely deserves it. And my dud of the week almost went to Humanoid, but it doesn't quite go to Humanoid this week. It is going to go to Certus on SK Gaming. He has been not good so far. It could have gone to Gilius as well, but Certus is going to get it on SK Gaming. Definitely need to step up from him in the mid lane. So yeah, player of the week is Syncroft on BDS. Dud of the week is going to be Certus on SK Gaming. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, go ahead and leave a like. It really does mean a lot. I don't shout this out often, but if you guys like what I do, go ahead and follow me on Twitter. I tweet about it games a lot. At SuperKmanrocks on Twitter. Go ahead and follow me there. And then leave in the comments what your favorite game or your favorite player or whatever, your player of the week, your game of the week, whatever you want to talk about, leave that down in the comment section below. You guys know I love chatting it up with you guys. Get excited for the LCS Power Rankings coming out tomorrow. But yeah, hope you guys are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.